Victoria, what's interested you this week?
Yeah, it was an article written by my colleague in Philadelphia, Max Mitchell, for the Legal Intelligencer, and they got a scoop about defunding for tech in Pennsylvania, and that how it's putting, like, they're not able, what is it? They won't be able to have like their court budget got slashed, and they won't be able to have enough for their, statewide criminal dockets and court information system, their common pleas computer management system, starting in July if they don't get enough funding. So I thought it was kind of interesting. Like we talk about here about like, oh, with COVID-19 and remote working and courts kind of being innovative by having like these remote court proceedings, but just like the reality of some states, they don't have enough funding for it. And just kind of like, we've been talking about during this podcast about like, oh, the talk was just kind of like, oh, remote working, law firms, how they work is going to change. And Steve kind of said, like, we're starting to see that even temper down to like, maybe by next year, everyone will be back in office. So I just thought it was kind of interesting, like the realities of budgets, and that some courts really can't innovate or use technology. They don't even have enough money to have the basics. So I thought it was just like kind of interesting, kind of puts me back in the reality of like, we would love to see like access to justice is needed and technology can play a big part in that. But it's just like for a lot of jurisdictions, they struggle for the basics. So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be a big problem because the backlog of cases, and I hear lawyers talking about it all the time, the backlog of cases that have been put on hold since the pandemic. And with criminal cases, I mean, it's even worse because you have people incarcerated, right? And the right to a speedy trial is now like almost a joke, right? Your speedy trial is what, 2 years from now because there's 10,000 other cases in front of you, and yet at the same time we're going to reduce funding to streamline any of that. It's a pretty serious problem, I think.
I really think well, I'm sorry, Caroline, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
No. Oh no, sorry, Bob. I was just going to say, do you remember when we talked about the judges who had to get their own Zoom accounts?
Yeah, in Georgia.
Right.
Yeah, right. And we were like, wow. Okay, anyway, sorry.
Yeah, and for that story, like it was an early story that stemmed from when I reached out to state courts. Pretty much, I kept it to like where LM has publications, and I reached out to Pennsylvania, and they said like, oh, for Zoom, are you guys providing funding? And the spokesperson just said it's up to the individual jurisdictions like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, because, and they mentioned the budget hits, they can't provide that. And it's just kind of like with those Georgia courts, I didn't hear anything about it being like budget constraints, but just like the realities of it, like even the basics and kind of like, hey, we need to deliver this so people can have access to like speedier, like not necessarily court trials, but proceedings. They have to come out of pocket for it. And just like in this example, like something that's very, courts in the United States might not be that tech savvy, but this is just kind of something that you lean on for justice and to make sure that everything is efficient, and they might lose the access to that. And that could be very detrimental.
One of the things that I'll add
the article.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Victor.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, the only thing that I'll add on the court is the only reason that I am keeping Internet Explorer around is for certain courts. Yeah, so you want to talk about innovation and basic level budgets, none of that's been addressed, let alone any of the new add-on stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked to a lot of judges in the course of different things, and I get the sense that, you know, a lot of them understand the idea to modernize the courts and to advance their use of technology, but it just keeps coming back to budget, and they just don't have significant budgets to, as you say, just even to address the basics in a lot of cases, let alone major overhauls. And I really think that is, you know, part of why we are going to see a surge in alternative online dispute resolution programs now. I mean, there've just been a number of them that I've written about just over the last month or so, kind of, that have come out. You know, ODR has been around for a long time and kind of never fully taken hold, but it seems to be, you know, this is another one of those things where if it's going to have a moment, this is it. And I think it's having a moment.
I think you're exactly right, Bob. That's with this is there's no
there's no excuse not to allow a third party to come in, especially if the courts aren't going to be prioritized. And I'm not saying the courts aren't prioritizing it, it's that they don't have the budget to prioritize the basic infrastructure. So I'm sorry, Victor, I'm moving. I'll shut up now for you.
That's all right. It's just like, I'm just doing a quick read of the article. I don't know how much of it is that and how much of it is, there was a specific law that was passed which allows the state to take money out of, out of the funds of the court, like for fines and court fees and stuff, which raises a whole other issue regarding like the constitutionality of those fines and, the idea of courts being a money-making system and whatnot. But taking out that money and then putting it into school safety, which, for someone who grew up in Pittsburgh and went to school in Pittsburgh, the idea that the state would put money into schools is actually pretty amusing to me. But then that raises some more issues about like sort of like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. And so I mean with this issue, it seems like there's a lot more complexity and a lot more like other things going on besides just like typical backlog, COVID related or not. Whatnot. There's specific fiscal issues that are at play, and some idea of like prioritizing certain areas of the state as opposed to other things and whatnot. So I don't know what kind of real conclusions we can draw from this specific example, but it does kind of raise interesting questions just overall regarding like how should we treat court systems? Should we prioritize them? How should they be allowed to raise revenue and be able to get revenue from the state and things like that?